Maybe I've been a little too unfair to this fic for nothing happening all of the first chapter. Loads of fics I've loved and cherished take about a few minutes to get started. Let's check out this next chapter. Palette. She sleeps. Oh great, even the fic's falling asleep. What chance do I got? Pain. Even constant pain. Unending cascades of lightning searing across the nerves can only do so much to combat exhaustion. It is possible to hurt so much that sleep becomes impossible. Twisting muscles and sudden fractures of bone proving that there's still strength for one more scream. But it's equally possible for the agony to reach a point where almost numbing, everything hurts all the time. So you can't isolate any single part. The internal and external horror slowly shift to background noise. There's nothing left to fight with. After so many hours, barely anything left to understand why fighting was ever necessary. A perpetual wash becomes the tide which carries a mind too weary for resistance into Luna's hands. Or, at least, the tiny pockets he had been given for her own place Luna knows nothing of. In her dream, she goes back to the good old days. And on the good days, there were other ponies. He didn't know everything. He would tell her, although he was always trying to learn. There are things that she needed to know, which simply wasn't an expert on. With some of those things, he would give her books, and with others, he would not bring up the subject again for moons before suddenly returning with a will and a head full of facts he had just finished acquiring. But with a precious few, he would decide that she needed to gain her knowledge directly from a different source. She would have some warning, some anticipation, hours to days and weeks of waiting, barely restrained as she looked ahead to the sheer idea of other, some pony who was not he or she. And then there'd be some pony new, some pony she would see but once. Those memories were recorded, preserved, kept safe where nothing could touch them, becoming clearer each time she went over them. There were two performances. Each was rehearsed before the visitor arrived. Every time, and he would not give permission for her to see them until he was satisfied. She was perfect on every detail. She was, he always checked. The more frequent role, she was one of his. He had been the first for her, or as he was for the first of many. She was staying here for a time, for he had taken an interest in her education. He felt she had great promise. This was the tale of the summer and winter, the story for holidays. The one was explaining why she had time to be on the estate. As this new pony was an expert on the subject, and there's so many subjects to study, would his guest be so very kind to take a day and teach her? For he knew that this was the pony that would give her the best information, the most thorough experience on the topic, and all the other persuasions which were hardly necessary, because the guest had agreed to this long before arrival, simply going through the necessary etiquette with him before proceeding. She had learned about etiquette early, and this role stayed the same as the years passed, with the only change coming from the costume department. As she aged, a simple country dress was added to her wardrobe, and then a pleasant, calling gown for formal dinners. She knew every hue both by heart. But with others, few enough that their faces took almost no room in her place of memories, he would introduce her with open pride, and press upon the visitor just how all important this was, how they and they alone had a piece of the puzzle, which had to be given to her so she would, in time, finish the great work. Perhaps this would even be the last piece. It never was. She would thank those guests for coming herself, gracious and elegant as she had taught to be, so very welcoming and graceful that this pony would give their time to her, and those ponies would look at her. She would be looked at when she was playing in first role, of course, but those books were different. For the most part, they were warm and gentle. She would be sure to remember them in eyes detail. Eyes were important. Welcoming her as much as she welcomed them. Not as excited, of course. They could hardly be that. She liked to do most of it, but perfectly come to her presence for a day. With the second part, pity and sorrow, disgust, and once, there had not been a good day. It was no place in this dream, a memory to replay on a different night, after things had become still worse. For now, let her listen and talk in protected places. Ask questions of those who look like you're in order to learn about the worlds you had never walked in, being educated by those who had been brought by the ones he loved so much. She knew she loved them. Castalia told her so. That had been the first lesson. Hey! This has been your wake-up check. Thank you. Mornings are playing Phil Shimmer. The Pegasi generally don't give them much of a choice. Well, unless we're bored or I'm feeling mischievous that day and I got weather duty and I really just want to get back to my bookstore and I really don't feel like it and I'm just got woken up by the crying of Josh Gorser's twin kids and some days I could just really want to rain on his parade and then there's that pizza guy. Oh, I don't even want to get into him. But go on. This was a market day, and the open field was beginning to fill with vendors who neither required nor was a full-time shop in town. Some always arrived earlier than others. Applejack would show up in time, of course, but her time was at least 2 hours ahead, after she checked the fields, examined sick trees for signs of recovery, and healthy ones to make sure that they hadn't caught anything overnight, searched through her crop for the choicest of samples in the new harvest, polished and shined, and verified that her personal money bag had a single golden bit to start with. Sleighing money, she told Twilight, and refused to say more. Oh, and then there were chores to complete, and perhaps a stray animal to round up. And Celestia knew what kind of state Apple Bloom would be in should the youngest of the family been woken up in the middle of the night with a pan for another spectacular failure, this time of the Luna Witness variety. No, Applejack came when everything was settled in the acres for a duration of at least one morning, which meant there were days when Big Magatos was the one who pulled the cart into the field for a day, quiet bit collecting, and the occasional piece of soft philosophical debate. Lila was already there, of course. It wasn't an official market day, unless the mint green unicorn was frowning at her instrument, making meticulous micro adjustments to the tension of the strings. There was a price to pay for every gift. Lyra's gift was the perfect pitch, the ability to tell exactly which frequency a note was vibrating on. The price was the horrific wincing and tooth grinding she went through every time she encountered a tune was almost exactly the scale. Lyra didn't hang out around Pinky much for fear of jaw fracture. Hers or Pinky's was almost a moot question. She couldn't start a performance unless her lyre was tuned to the level of perfection, which nearly scared Twilight, and as she worked, she unconsciously adjusted her body into persistence, which made Twilight's spine ache. There were days when it was genuinely hard to look at Lyra for any real length of time, and many ponies tossed bits with their eyes closed. Snowflake was pulling at a guide rope of his teeth, allowing the intricate layers of twine within the pile of fabric in front of him to tighten, lift, and eventually toddly shape in an open front tent with a simple sign above the entrance: Day and night labor. No job too big or too heavy. I prefer Snowflake to be a masseuse, but that's beside the point. The huge Pegasus had trouble keeping a steady job. Not too many ponies wanted to be on the receiving end of his special talent for long strength training, done with precision and enthusiasm the way was guaranteed results, with the first one being 2 days shivering in the field position, was he who never met him, which left him with long periods of bit-free time to fill before a new generation of unsuspecting athletes decided they needed that last crucial push before the games. So he hired himself out for any acts of raw muscle power which might be needed, at the same time let the employees come to him. Twilight brought him in once herself when she had a sudden appointment in Camelot to hit on the day she had been expecting a shipment of books. Thousands of pounds of books arriving on a day when the Weather Bureau had scheduled an afternoon downpour, and Rainbow Dash couldn't be found to reschedule. All of them sitting helpless in front of the library and growing wetter by the second. The defenseless ink blurring as pages began to soften towards disintegration. The thought had been unbelievable. One man run to the market layer, see a snowflake hang towards the tree to move the huge bundles to safety, watching him fly away with relief, trying to not listen to the laws of physics as they wept. Flower wishes, Daisy to her friends and acquaintances, by Celestia's tale when you stop panicking, to everyone who had known her for more than a week, almost had her booth ready. Flower erasers were displayed on every possible surface, suitable for decoration, presentation to every special sun pony. Or, business was slow, a pleasant light snack. The last was to come into play when Daisy became bored or distracted. Though I never seen her consuming her own merchandise to get ready for a phobia attack, it was just a matter of time. Rainbow Dash, on one particularly insensitive day, About a week before they climbed the peak to face the Red Dragon, I proposed a fear-off contest between the friends known around Ponyville as the Flower Trio. Or I swear in Celestia's mane, you three have no reason to be freaking out like this, to any pony who had known them for more than a moon. And Fluttershy, last one to faint, wins. Rarity had angrily declared the ass of Fluttershy as the preemptive victor, pointing out that those three had run from whatever was scaring them. Fluttershy would stay in place and tremble until she figured out how to deal with it. Which could certainly be more practical than mindlessly charging at the world head on, hoping to beat your problems out of the sky. Or even that's a good surprise. About a tenth of a second's worth of something might be vaguely opposed to tiny semblance of guilt, then hastily changed the subject to the Wonderbolts and kept it there until the others wanted to sit on her, which Applejack finally had. Ooh! Those things seemed to be new. Twilight took note of them. Well, pale pink unicorn with a somewhat oversized horn, a mane so deeply brown as to approach black field and match her eyes, deep gray. She was carefully arranging sculpture samples along a table, with nervously glancing from side to side, as if feeling her selling rights to be challenged from every single angle. Or worse, having a stranger approach who might have been talking to buying something. A tall pearl Pegasus with vibrant blue eyes and pure white mane followed her, gently adjusting sculpture positions, rubbing against her nervous companion's flank. The key marks were the silhouette of a regal form for the Pegasus and a flaming old-fashioned torch for the unicorn. Yes, definitely new in town. And Twilight had a moment of sympathy for the sky unicorn. It was hard to be socially retiring in a town with a Pinkie Pie. The poor mare had, at best, until the mid-morning break before she was partied, whether she would like it or not. Then again, it might be weeks before the actual party was thrown, even if the countdown to Pinkification had less than 2 hours to run. Pinkie's social calendar was starting to look like one of Twilight's more comprehensive tick lists. There were a lot of new ponies in town these days, and most of the current arrivals were Twilight's fault. Hey! Vic! Hey guys! Are you all awake? Good. I want you to write a 2-page essay on what we just discussed. Seriously, 2 minutes. It took just 12 minutes to get here. And I think finally something is about to happen. Like this one. Her field pulled the unicorn out of the mare out of the bushes, lifted her on one half of standard of Celeste, an old measure of height, distance from the ground to the princess's front led shoulder straight up, and then rotated her until she was upside down. Twilight was careful to let the field deliberately exclude the camera, which fell away from the mare's neck and thudded to the ground with total lack of ceremony. She was getting really good at excluding the camera. There had been far too much practice. The other most recent arrivals in town stared. A few ponies began to draw closer. Most of the merchants, and now the majority of the earliest shoppers, ignored the whole thing. They had seen this particular play before. Always ended the same way. Two, with some anticipation, headed towards the nearest sound of propelled wire. "Put me down! I know my rights! I can—" "And I know mine," Twilight declared, trying to not let the frustration turn to a growl. "Recite the law, please." "I was just minding my own business when you—" Twilight let a second bubble field melt at the camera, levitating to the rest in front of the mare's averted eyes before deliberately dropping it again. "Recite the law, please." 3 more ponies inched closer. The green and brown unicorn groaned, in a tone which made it clear she considered everything bad in the world to be Twilight's fault. Might just spend the rest of her life falsifying proof. She rushed through. "Any pony who finds some pony taking a picture that without the subject's pony express permission may dispose of the picture and discipline the photographer in any way they see fit, as long as the photographer is not injured and any damage to the camera is paid for. And that is a very expensive unit, which you're going to comprehend for me in full right." "It's a bell and hoofball. It is 28 years old. It was the second cheapest model they made at the time. The years been slightly less kind to it on the secondary marketplace than a Jackie Chan chicken track." Twilight resisted. "Ooh, a Jack Trick, pony reference. Classy." Spit, as a recently arrived time turner, and chuckled somewhat behind her. "There are more ponies willing to pay a tenth of a bit to read all about how Princess Celestia intends to bathe the world in eternal sunshine until we all catch fire than want this camera. Lena Shoes, has Murdoch's ever spent a single income to outfit any of you?" Flicker and Phil opened the camera, exposed to Phil. "Better hope he's willing to hand over the smallest change he has, as I've been sending nearly all my comprehensions to him for distribution. Once a week by courier was just easier than carrying all those tiny coins. Before you ask how I knew, All 8 of you have the same basic cutie mark. Does he hire any pony who doesn't show those broken scales? One end would show the image representing a pony's talent, and the other would be empty, fallen, and rusty for neglect. The mayor either chose to ignore most of what had been overwhelmed by the sheer flow of information. The latter wasn't uncommon when dealing with Twilight. See, one of the simple sentence done. How do you know so much about cameras? Because after the first week, I thought I could save some time by just memorizing the prices. Not that she had to go to sleep with the catalog for Murdoch's lackeys, but she didn't say a word. Just watched the unicorn. Gotta love these fics when they give us such wonderful pony names as Murdoch. And you were doing so well with that Jack Chiclet joke. So I'm starting to look a little dizzy. Only pigs I were designed to deal with blood rushing to their heads. Could you put me down now? Will you leave town? Look, I'm just trying to make a living. I know. Off me. Unicorn gave up on assistance and had never come anywhere near politeness. Her next reply came half a species away from her own hiss. Every pony knows the diarchy passed its stupid law just to protect you, princess. The last word was spat. Well, actually, there is no law. We. Okay, admittedly, I was actually going, hey, does anybody else notice Twilight's got wings? Everybody else was just kind of blind to it for a while until Derpy pointed it out, and then everybody was like, oh, Twilight's got wings. Then we went all back to work, lived our day. What? Ponyville's a small town, guys. Unless it's a monster attack or a wedding, we generally just go about our day. Hell, most of my magic duels or spells or the things that go onto my bookstore in this studio rarely go unnoticed. I mean, for crying out loud, I have a Goomba, I have an point version of Lum, I have the dog Luna. I'm his secretary. Thank you, Luna. And I also have a freaking red demon in here, plus several other people from different multiverses. And I also take my time going out there. Do you know what the most attention I've gotten so far? Besides people coming in to buy my books? That one time Derpy came by to give me a ticket for jury duty. That's it. Twilight's field caught the gob as it emerged, so you could feel the photographer's own feel exert, pushing back, trying to get free. It was like trying to pollute a freshwater leak with a droplet of ocean. The visitor had just enough strength to carry her gear. Trixie could have turned her to powder without the amulet. Her own fear flickered slightly. And Twilight's lack of sleep had been temporarily compensated for by muffins, a long bread done in the Prince style, keeping the restraint in place required about as much as blinking. You can't spot all of us. I can as long as I keep automatically probing every bus in town. Twilight raised the photographer by another Celeste, and was kept a rapid upward rotation at the same instant. Snowflake decided to take a personal interest, hovering, somehow, in front of one of the chasing sections of the twisting unicorn. It made a sound. It wasn't a happy declaration of support. It was more like an Ursa Meyer at just out of milk. Okay, fine, I'll leave. Then I'll put you down. Before the photographer could say anything else, Twilight added, Fountain or compost heap? What? Fountain it is! Mostly because he wasn't sure of a location for the nearest compost heap. Her field carried the photographer out of sight. Screens trailing away its latest nuisance carried her with gruffly memorized precision. Twilight had a telekinetic route to the fountain or from any outdoor site in Ponyville, plus one for Sweet Apple Acres. There had been a camera carrier lurking in the trees. She was so sick of this. Are you all right, Princess? Daisy, timidly, of course. There was a splashy sound in the distance. I'm fine, Daisy. And that was just the eighth one from Murdoch's. Once he added the other so-called news agencies, independents, a few solo operators with a printing press and far too much time on their hose. And it's Twilight. You know that. Another splash. Again, we really just started calling her Twilight automatically. Oh, sure, there were some ponies that decided to call her Princess, the ones that visited the coronation. The rest of us just saw that the crazy librarian had finally gotten her wings, and we just went back to reading. Now, if I may be serious, I kind of do like that the show didn't have Ponyfield make that big of a fuss over Twilight's wings. Because I don't know about you guys, but it kind of makes sense. Every pony in Ponyfield knew Twilight as Twilight. And if Twilight being the royal student of the princess wasn't enough to draw their attention and tell them, hey, she is a VIP, I really don't think that they're going to notice anything else. Because, let's think about it. Real close, folks. If Twilight being a student of their ruler actually mattered as much as, being a princess does, like you guys are trying to say, then Twilight's library should be filled to the brim with ponies. With plenty of ponies trying to, you know, get on our good side. But nope. Not helping is that Twilight was very forthcoming. Now, I know I've done a short story about Twilight holding court, but please note, that was like only for an hour of the day. Guarantee you, most of the other ponies, and if I really want to, I could have said that was the only time Twilight actually got to exert her princesshood. Because again, they know it's Twilight first. So, I don't really see how it would be affecting her logically. I'm sorry, Princess. The air pony pulled back slightly, nervously pawing the ground with her front right hoof. It won't happen again. Oh, or is this fic going to be one of those? I'm going to try to insert realism into a fic about ponies to make a statement. Because I don't like insert plot point here. Because if it is, I hate to tell you guys that, but I've dealt like 20 of those this month. Noteworthy now, sounding as if he had been lost in our manual of courtly etiquette somewhere towards the index, Delaney was one because he had checked out the library last week. Princess, if we but knew that she was within yonder greenery, ancient courtly etiquette. It's okay, it's over. Although Swasey wasn't. Valiantly, already knowing what the result would be. And could you not call me Pokey, who had just tried over from his carnival stand, popped the balloons with a thrown dart, fielded her mouth-operated slingshot with molten melting, went in self-discord. Don't worry, Princess. We'll get the next one for you. That's very nice of you, but could every pony... But they wouldn't. The small crowd just kept on apologizing for something they didn't know about, couldn't control, and they were so sorry that the princess had been bothered, that the princess had to waste her morning on such things. They were just glad the princess was all right now, and could get back to doing whatever a princess required of the first hour after sunrise, before the princess moved on to the rest of her princessly schedule. And then they were blinking the dazzle out of their eyes, wondering what was so important that the princess had to teleport off to it. Some distance away, another scream broke through the air as the photographer was dunked for the sixth and final time. Can I just say something with all this? I know they're trying to be realistic in a fic about ponies, and let me continue to point out that annoys me. But, this whole situation's irking me. Because it feels so out of touch with what we know about the show, about what we know about the characters. I've always postulated that Twilight getting her wings was basically a royal title, a knighthood, being granted a grand prize. That was it. And if you look at the show, you could also see that princesshood for Twilight was basically her being granted a governess. Heck, in some ways, it felt like being called a princess in Equestria was the equivalent of being called a princess in Star Wars. You know, where you're elected, and princess is just a title given to the ruler of the planet for about such and such. It's a constitutional monarchy based off of a system of governance. This is, and its world is not ours, so their definition is not ours. Please see, please see how Leia worked, and you can see that in the way they act. Twilight just was given a higher position, but it also spoke to how Twilight related to the other ponies. That by being herself, she was able to be a princess of friendship and connected, and every pony respected her for that. But by doing this here, feels out of touch with what we know about the show. We know that the ponies aren't caring because they just see Twilight as a different person. The same for when she got the freaking castle. We know that she's just Twilight with a crown. Woo. Because that's the way it is. Just because I got a freaking master's degree doesn't make me some sort of incomparable person. And just because somebody is a president doesn't mean that as soon as they get out, they don't know how to hide it. Heck, I know that there are some famous people out there who don't need disguises because, well, you wouldn't know. And that's the way it kind of works. For instance, if the mayor of my town came out and just walked around, I wouldn't notice. Because he's just a person. And that's the way life works sometimes, guys. I'm sorry to tell you this. And that's the way we see ponies work. We see that they care more about the person over the title. Unless you're somebody like Celestia who's earned it over years, being Twilight just means she's Twilight, a governess. And you just move on. Trying to insert this is trying to insert realism into a thing where it doesn't belong. And quite frankly, feels like it takes some of the magic and some of the fun out of the story.